Okay, so Pompeii is always giving up its secrets. It's a working site. Stuff's being found there all the time. It's very exciting. This was found recently. What I wanted to do is talk about what it tells us, but also how it helps counter the whole Pompeii was frozen in time thing, which you'll often read and hear, and something which kind of gets under my skin a bit. I should add, there is a caveat where you can make that claim, and I'll come to those. But let's talk about what was found to start with. So, in short, there was some archaeology done that revealed that people had likely moved back into the ruins of Pompeii. And when I say ruins, you have to think about what Pompeii was like after the eruption. Most of it was under a level of debris. So we're talking here about the stuff that was managing, that was tall enough at the time to still be above what was the new ground level. So think of, say, a block of flats or something like that. You might have the top floor now just above ground level that people can access. And if they can access that, they can get the stairs, they can go down lower. So you have this kind of weird building where you have a small amount of it above ground, but you've still got plenty of building below ground. And it seems that was the case, that perhaps poor people, destitute people, people who had actually possibly been made homeless by the eruption came back and were able to make some sort of settlement in the ruins at Pompeii. And one find, for example, was a newer oven that was found in the lower basements or lower levels of one of these buildings. What this does is it further changes Pompeii. And that's really important, because one of the things that is sometimes said about Pompeii was that it was frozen in time, and this is not the case. Why is it not the case? Well, think of it as a constantly moving dynamic site before, during, and after the disaster which befell it in AD 79. So in the lead up to the events of the eruption, you have it's argued that you have seismic activity. So you have small tremors and things like that going on. And yeah, you might think to yourself, well, perhaps that didn't really resonate much with the people at Pompeii. But I think it did. And that's because there had been a huge earthquake there a decade or two before. And this had caused a lot of structural damage. In fact, there was stuff still being repaired when the eruption in AD 79 happened. So this is well within the sort of cultural knowledge of people. People might remember it. Some people might have experienced it. So let's just say, for example, you're someone who was living at Pompeii, and in the weeks prior, you start, obviously you don't know what's going to happen, but you start hearing and feeling seismic activity. And you think to yourself, I'm not so sure I want to be here anymore. I know I'll go and move somewhere else. Perhaps I've got relatives that I can go to. Perhaps if I'm wealthy, I've got another location I can move all of my goods to, or say a lot of my furniture to, and I can take the family and we'll stay there for a while and we'll just see what happens back here at Pompeii. And that's really important, because if you're wealthy, you've got a lot of stuff and you've got a lot of nice items. Are you going to leave those items back in Pompeii if you think there might be some form of an earthquake? No, you'll take them with you. So even before the eruption, Pompeii was being changed by people moving possibly their goods, items out of it. And then you actually have the eruption itself. So again, with the whole caveat of we're not exactly sure what the date was, on the 24th of August, you have the eruption occurring around midday. And then you have around, I would say, 5 or 6 hours to get out of Dodge. And I say that because initially what happens at Pompeii, and I've done videos on this, they're on the playlist. I've also done a podcast on the Ancient History Hound all about this. The first 5 hours or so, the number one problem you've got at Pompeii is pumice falling. Pumice is falling, I think it's around 15 centimeters an hour. It's hot, it's accumulating on buildings, it's causing structural failings, and that's a big problem early on. People tend to think of the pyroclastic flows being the big cause of loss of life and that sort of a thing. It's actually structural collapse that causes a lot of loss of life to start with, because these buildings start falling under the weight of the pumice that's upon them. But they're causing problems elsewhere because it's choking the sort of routes and roads that you'd be familiar with. It's also really dark. Remember that. So trying to get out is quite a difficulty. So, of course, lots of people stayed. However, lots of people probably left as well. And if they could, they got out early. What do you do if you've only got a short time to get out of somewhere? Again, they don't know what's going to happen, but they're thinking, let's get out as soon as I can. Well, of course, you're going to take your goods. You're going to take the most important items. In the same way that if someone came along to you now and said, you've got to get out, there's a fire drill, you've got to get out of the building. Everyone takes their phone. Everyone takes stuff they really shouldn't take. That would have happened at Pompeii. People would have taken stuff out of the city or out of the town, in which case you're changing the nature of it. This isn't a fly in amber or an insect in amber. This is being rapidly changed. What's in the city is being moved out of the city. So that's something that's occurring. But you have it afterwards. So again, you have these people moving in possibly later, doing some looting, but you actually have looting going on later on. Mary Beard wrote a really good book on Pompeii. If you're interested in Pompeii, well worth a read. And in it, she discusses a couple of tunnels that were found. And when they started excavating Pompeii, they found holes in walls with signs or sort of markings on them indicating this room has been cleared. So at a later date, you actually had people digging into Pompeii and looting it. So again, you're changing it. So when it was when the big archaeology occurred in Pompeii and the excavations occurred, we weren't looking at something frozen in time. We were looking at something that had changed before, during, and after the eruption. And to go back on that caveat I made at the beginning about some things being frozen in time, I think you can say that for items such as mosaics. You can say for stuff on the wall, say a half-finished paint job. Yeah, that has been frozen in time, or perhaps a fresco. But what really hasn't is the nature of Pompeii itself. As I mentioned, this has been changing. It was in flux. Still an incredible site, and it's always interesting to hear what's going to come out. And you can only hope that more stuff will be discovered that we can learn much more about Pompeii from.